Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. Sit back, relax, stay sinful. Tonight's video features another deep web story lineup. There are restaurants who specialize in selling and cooking human meat. Cannibalism taken to the next level. As far as my knowledge, only the most remote tribes with more or less no development were practicing cannibalism, but it's evident enough that even the most literate people do it. Human meat being cooked and served at restaurants, which are all by means very hard to find, and the location of these types of restaurants are available in the deep web. You just need to keep digging until you find one. If somebody asks me if I'm fond of human meat, I get angry and say no. But selling human meat is rather a very good business, illegal nonetheless. People show up in good numbers just to consume dishes made from it. Any dish that is prepared by using animal meat is also made using human meat. Cannibalism is real, and it may consume the world sooner than expected. Deep web stories getting weirder and weirder, with humans literally consuming the meat of their own species. Number 2. This is not a joke of bad or worse taste. Scary deep web stories like these really do disturb me. A detailed guide to cooking women, along with videos showing the same sounds ridiculous, but it is present on the dark web. The details of even the minute cut on the body to make the cooking better are provided in this guide. Cooking live women seems even more gruesome than cooking dead human meat. This guide focuses on keeping the subject alive for as long as possible while she's being cooked. How to cook a girl in order to ensure her survival to the longest possible time is explained here, and people have shown interest in these videos. Number 3. You know that accessing the deep web is basically inviting a lot of malware and spyware into your system. Even with a VPN and top-notch antivirus, people on deep websites from the dark web can still hack your system without your knowledge. I visited a weird website with nothing but login options. I just blindly logged anything works here. You don't need a username or password. Once you've logged in, you could see a hello text file create on your desktop. The next thing I saw really scared me to death. The text file hello.txt had only 3 words. We see you. When such things happen to you, what would you do? I would relocate to a remote place with a limited or no internet connectivity for the rest of my life. After I closed the website and deleted the hell.txt file, after every restart, the file would pop up on my screen until I had to reinstall the entire operating system. 4. People who are sexually attracted towards transferring or receiving STDs, sexually transmitted disease, are known in the deep web as bug chasers. There are lots of darknet sites which support this idea, and darknet ensures that these like-minded people talk to each other. HIV, chlamydia, and syphilis are the most common among STDs, and many bug chasers are boasting about spreading these diseases to unwitting people. There are many dark web forums with scary deep web stories, and this one is one of the creepiest, since STDs on purpose is not a good thing to do. It is a heinous act committed just for the bodily pleasure. A group of men were injected with HIV-positive blood as a way to reach climax during a sex party in 2007. Number 5. A fiction turned into a silver reality. Sad Satan is one of the deep web stories related to games. A typical glitch game which made the system behave erratically after downloading and installing from the dark web. Sad Satan became popular very fast. Images of demonic children with irrelevant, eerie music, along with 2 celebrities, Jimmy Savile and Rolf Harris, who are linked to sexual child abuse, and more, really did bring out the worst gaming experiences nonetheless. People liked it. The images of kids were actual photos of kids being molested, as some sources claimed. People were confused at the beginning about the existence of this game, which was later cleared when a game house released its own version of Sad Satan. Number 6. Are you thinking that pink meth is a kind of drug? I don't blame you if you do, since the name has meth in it. We conclude it to be a drug site. However, it is completely different scary deep web stories shared here. Pink Meth is a website which stole nude photos of both genders and allowed visitors to share them. The other shocking option is that the visitors can update information about the person in the image, which led to harassment. Due to the victims of the brave face spoke out the truth, the government had to intervene to shut down the website. However, rumors about pink meth still being active is scary news for those who are dating. Number 7. The 255,000 job opportunity. One of the weird deep web stories is the 255K job opportunity. You are offered $255,000 for 6 months, and you have to work on a ship at the same time. Would you be willing to take the job? There was no other information about the job, but it does provide a few services required or few talents required to even be considered for the job. Some of these criteria were combat experience, 6 months on a ship, no communication with the outside world. $255,000 is the total payment for 6 months. When you offer little over $250,000 for 6 months of work, you would certainly consider it, but the other options or points mentioned were screaming red alerts. Combat experience and no communication with anyone for 6 months sounds like a death door invitation to me. Number 8. There were a series of snuff videos released in 2012, which had a huge impact on society. A 19-year-old girl who was found out to be Peter Scully's girlfriend and a prostitute by profession tortured, toddled in between the age of 18 months to 4 years. The most horrific series of 3 to 4 videos caught mainstream media. She tortured toddlers in the most heinous ways. It reminds everyone of the lowest standards of a human being. The mental depravity or the pleasure they get from torturing young children describe a new level of insanity. The introductory scene invited all the viewers to see the mental breakdown of Daisy, who was a toddler. The thought of injuring a little baby around 18 months in itself is horrific, and they did it for so many children up to the age of 4. These videos were uploaded with a cost as high as $10,000 per clip, which says a lot of people who are interested in watching such terrifying acts by paying for it. In the end, it was Peter Scully who was the mastermind behind the pedophile ring, and the last news about him was that he was arrested and up for trial in a foreign country. Child pornography is illegal all over the globe, and watching it can be considered illegal too. We don't need to see another Daisy's destruction videos made. Be aware of your surroundings and keep your children safe. Number 9. The more you search for deep web stories, the more shocked and amazed you would be. There are many sites which will redirect you to weird places. A similar site had a link that was anchored as, "For journalists and people new to deep web." Just out of curiosity, we clicked the link to see what it was all about. The new web page started to load and the image of an old Asian man with blood on his chin was still loading. I closed the tab since it was making me sick to see the rest of the image. We still kept wondering what the rest of the image was. It may be a severed head or a body in a bad state. Nonetheless, these images will disturb you psychologically. I really should thank the slow internet, since I stopped it before I could see the entire image. Number 10. Experimentation on humans is completely forbidden and considered if you do an experiment. As per history, Hitler had an entire science division dedicated to human experimentation during World War II. Some of his will to experiment on humans having lingered over the decades, people are still doing it. There are many websites on the deep and dark web which invite people to human experimentation. The common target individuals would be orphans and kidnapped victims. If an orphan goes missing, no one would care since such is the world these days. People are forced into experimentation while others willing to agree to be experimented on. Hidden Wiki redirects you to these sites, which are related to human experiments. These sites have lately been inactive as per many deep web users. They may be shut down or laying low due to the radar of authorities being focused on them. Nonetheless, an urban legend of deep web stories human experiment is not a myth, but it still happens. Maybe not at this point in time, but it will emerge again in the future. Number 11. Dead Girls, as the name indicates, is a site which shows images of dead girls between the age of 5 to 16 years only. It is a horrifying view and endless images of dead young girls. Out of the many deep web stories that we pondered upon, this is certainly the scariest. The site warns every one of its viewers to not take or save these images, or the dead girl's ghosts will haunt you forever. The photos can be of the many of the same dead girl, or different dead girls, but it is still confusing or illogical as to why someone would want to see images in the first place. Mental depravity or insanity can be defined here at best by looking at the state of this site. The worst part is yet to come. Many people have shown interest in these sites since they like seeing images of these dead children. Various dead scenarios of girls will be portrayed here, which excites a few of the populace. The society that we live in have depraved people, and it's always better to be careful than regret after things have happened. Number 12. We know that the deep web can be accessed with a different browser. Usually people prefer Tor. This deep web story that I'm going to reveal is a true story, which has happened to many deep web users. It is scary as it gets. The phrase "you better start running" does sound like a threat to me. When you are unable to find what you're looking for online, we tend to click on every other link. The same thing to many of the deep web users who went all crazy on clicking random links. This led to a random wiki page which had a few random links. Curious to know about the link, a few more common clicks by users led to a new page to load. Here comes the climax. The new page loads, which had only these words in bold: "You better start running." It could be a hoax or it could be real, since the users who got this message closed the deep web immediately. Number 13. The anonymity of deep web is what makes it unique and easy to use. However, how would you feel if your identity was revealed on the deep web? It certainly scares me to death. A similar thing happened to one of the deep web users recently. You being completely anonymous, comment on a random video while browsing the deep web. A few minutes later, someone replies to your comment, along with your actual last name addressing you as Mr. Enter your last name. The next thing I would do in cases like this would be run away, reinstall my entire operating system, or even buy a new desktop and sell that one. This is how a normal human would react. If the anonymity is removed, you are completely vulnerable to the deep web, so it is always better to have a VPN while accessing this dark, dark place. Number 14. An alternate reality game called No Love Deep Web surfaced, which was basically a scavenger hunt. You were asked to do random things at random times by the game, which was found exciting and at the same time scary by many Tor users. This is an augmented reality which was a marketing strategy to promote the new album for Death Grips with the same name, No Love Deep Web. One of the tasks that were provided was to go to a different city to answer a payphone. Someone who was daring enough did it, and all they could hear was heavy breathing on the other end. A similar task was done by a girl when she was asked to go fill up gas in some part of New York at 3 a.m. These random tasks had no meaning or logic behind them, but yet people were interested in doing them. Number 15. An addictive website, as per the subscriber reviews, shows that people are interested in watching other users die. The last dying moments of a person being recorded as only being a host on the site. Anything else will be strictly removed. You can post links to these websites of last moments of a person, and they will host it for you. Out of many deep web horror stories, I found this to have quite an effect on people mentally. With more than 15,000 subscribers, this site accepts any link redirecting to videos or images of people actually dying. Seriously, why do so many people want to see others die? I don't understand the logic behind this, and it certainly is a mystery to me. And of course, scary and weird deep web stories for me. Is it not for you? Some of these videos show the execution of a person by beheading or hanging or other forms of death sentence, which is quite gruesome to watch. Number 16. Have you ever heard of a digital paranormal activity? Well, out of the many deep web stories, this is something weirder or creepier than normal ones. A Korean comic which starts like a normal scary story tends to get creepy the more you read it. Whoever wrote this comic and designed the website has coded paranormal activity into it. As you move through the pages, a ghost takes control of your mouse. To be honest, none of the darknet stories sounds weirder than this. A digitally created entity which takes control of your mouse sounds ridiculous. But it does happen. Reading a comic leading to a ghost controlling your mouse initially. Who knows what else is starting to control over time. Please be away from this site if you don't wish to experience a digital ghost. Number 19. Mariana's Web is buried very deep, even in the depth of the dark web. Many only say it exists in theory, but none prove its existence. However, it is beneath the code itself, housing many secrets of mankind, like the location of Atlanta, communications with other life forms like aliens, and subset of internet used by extraterrestrial beings monitor us via these routes. These secrets will certainly throw the world off balance with the proven existence of Mariana's Web. Many of the experts in the fields have yet to gain any information from this part of the web. You need some high-powered tools and software to look beneath the code for information. Imagine contacting another life form, and its proof would certainly throw the scientific field in chaos. Number 18. A social experiment went wrong in all possible ways. Bad Self-Eater was started in 2016 by a man who physically started dropping fake currency notes with ominous things printed on them. When I say ominous things about Illuminati, end of the world stuff, apocalyptic symbols and hidden messages, people were so obsessed with it and started to research and decipher hidden messages to make their own theories. To even fake note had one thing in common: the website barselfeater.com. People started checking this website, which welcomes you with an ominous track and an eerie countdown music. This currency started to circulate in the www network, and you know how things progress once it's online. A wildfire began recording this topic online. The worst part was waiting for the clock on the website to tick down to the last second. Once the time arrived, everyone with their apocalyptic theories and researches were completely disappointed. A video of a man criticizing all the viewers played, and then he started educating about evils of abortion in the same site. Deep web stories are always shocking and can have a different impact on different people. You need to understand the fact everything is not real. Some of the stories are fake. If you really want to read more, there are lots of websites which talk about it non-stop with live forums. You can voice out your opinions or share something that you may have experienced. Before you do that, please ensure that your system is well protected and you get a good VPN software if possible. My Cousin and the Dark Web, Part 1. My mother and father were killed in a terrible car accident when I was 6 years old. Since then, I've been raised by my aunt and uncle in Texas along with my older cousin. It took me a while to adjust to this new arrangement, but in time I came to accept my aunt and uncle as parental figures. The person I was closest with was my cousin Lacey, but we were more like brother and sister. Living in Texas, we would often hunt and fish. My uncle taught both of us to be expert marksmen when it came to hog hunting. This comes in handy in the southern United States, where these wild pigs are considered pests due to their effect on the ecosystem. By the time I was 13, I had become a terrific shooter. My uncle sometimes joked that I could become a police sniper. Over time, my cousin and I both developed an interest in computers. This was in the late 90s and early 2000s, when the internet was a much newer phenomenon, and the idea of an information superhighway was very fascinating to both of us. Lacey is 2 years older than me, and thus graduated high school sooner. She was accepted to the University of Texas with a scholarship in computer sciences. As for me, my initial enthusiasm in computers has since waned into casual interest. My ultimate passion was sports journalism, and I would end up attending the University of Southern California with a scholarship in that field. In summer of 2006, I finished my sophomore year while Lacey had graduated from college and was working for a large technical firm in Houston. It was summer break and I hadn't seen her in a while, so I flew into town to visit for a few days. After spending a couple of hours catching up, she brought up a subject that had since come back to haunt me. She referred to it as the dark web. One of her coworkers had been bragging about spending time there, claiming to have purchased drugs on numerous occasions, and also watching some very hardcore videos that cannot be found anywhere on the regular internet. Lacey learned that this part of the web could be only accessed if you were a really good hacker. This predated Tor software by several years. Hacking had become a hobby of hers and she decided to check it out. I figured, what the hell, right? What could be so bad about this dark web? Well, plenty as it would turn out. As we went browsing, we both lost count of how many hitman advertisements, drug dealers, and animal torture videos we saw. Some videos were live streams of what seemed to be genuine rapes, which caused both of us to cringe. When we even saw things like crush porn, apparently there are people out there who are sexually aroused at the sight of baby animals being crushed. Despite all these horrors, Lacey had a strange fascination with this place, but I had already lost interest. Eventually she came across a link entitled TJ's Horror Shop. It sounded corny as hell, but Lacey clicked on it anyway. She was greeted by a message informing her that a show was going to be taking place that night, but it was members only. The page gave her the option of registering, and she did just that. Southern Nerd 04 was the username she chose, if I remember correctly, and the website accepted her registration. She seemed eager to see what this was all about, but I felt very uneasy. From what I had seen so far, these people on the dark web are the type who hide their true colors, and I didn't want to see Lacey associating with people like that. After her registration went through, we were greeted by a digital clock, gradually counting down to the beginning of the live stream. It felt like an eternity, but the clock eventually reached 0, and the screen lit up. We saw a man wearing a skull mask, skeleton gloves, and dressed in leather. He was twiddling his fingers like Mr. Burns. We heard him speak in a deep, distorted voice. "Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to TJ's Horror Shop. For all the newcomers, it is my pleasure to welcome you into my house of horrors." It seemed like a little silly show, but given everything else we had seen on the dark web, I wasn't convinced that something truly sinister was out of the question. Tonight's first victim. 2 other men who were also wearing masks and dressed in leather dragged a third person in front of the camera. His hands were tied behind his back, and there was a bag over his head like he was some kind of hostage. Andrew Fleming of Charlotte, North Carolina, 43 years old, divorced father of son and daughter. He has been selected as the first victim of tonight's bloodbath. I began feeling sick to my stomach, and I noticed Lacey was beginning to look nervous. For those of you who are new, my viewers are the ones who get to pick how our victims meet their demise. Your username is selected at random. After your name is chosen, a box will appear on your screen to offer you several choices. The option you select is the method in which this poor bastard will die. One of the henchmen ripped the bag off the hostage's head. The man was sobbing in terror and was pathetically begging for his life. I sincerely hoped this was all just an act, but I was becoming more and more convinced otherwise. And now, let the selection process begin. On the left side of the screen, all of the usernames of those watching began to briefly flash up at random. Some kind of algorithm was using some sort of lottery system to select who would determine this man's fate. Eventually it settled on the username, Who Gives a Shit 771. Who Gives a Shit 771, one of our favorite guests. TJ shouted in glee. How will Mr. Fleming's life come to a horrifying end? Let's find out. A box appeared that showed the following options. A. Strangulation. B. Mutilation by chainsaw. C. Repeated gunshots. The user chose the third option. Very well. Let the carnage begin. One of the masked henchmen appeared from off-screen armed with a sawed-off shotgun. He aimed at the man's genitals and fired. Lacey and I both gasped in shock and horror while Mr. Fleming howled in extreme agony. The henchman lifted the man up and shot him in both kneecaps, causing him to drop back down to the floor and continue begging for mercy. His plea fell on deaf ears. The henchman then took out a 9mm pistol and emptied the entire clip into his back. I couldn't bear to watch anymore. I looked away from the computer and threw up. I heard one more gunshot and the man's screaming stopped. What a delightfully gruesome display. Now on to our next guest. The other guys dragged another hostage into view, also bound with a bag over their head. The bag was removed to reveal a young woman not much older than me. Melissa Cartwright of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 24 years old and single. You will be our next victim. Now let's see who decides your fate. As before, the slot at the left of the screen began flashing usernames at random. Much to our horror, it settled on the username Lacey had chosen. Tears began welling up in her eyes. Lacey, shut this damn thing off, I shouted. Southern Nerd 04, a newcomer. We are happy to welcome you into our gruesome family. Now, you must choose how Miss Cartwright dies. The small box reappeared, but with several different options than before. Flaying, electrocution, or incineration. Lacey sat frozen. Lacey, get off this page now, I said with a mixture of fear and anger. Several minutes passed and TJ had grown impatient. Well, Southern Nerd, we're waiting. Lacey began frantically pressing buttons, hoping to escape from this awful place. If you don't choose in the next 20 seconds, you will be on our show next, TJ said menacingly. For a moment, Lacey appeared to be considering one of the murder options, but before she could choose, I ripped the power cord from its outlet, shut the damn computer off. Lacey broke down sobbing while I rushed over to comfort her. You don't think they'll find me, do you? She said fearfully. I don't know. I stayed with Lacey a few more days before flying back to Los Angeles. To be honest, I wanted classes to resume, but it was the middle of July. The whole situation with those wackos on the dark web appeared to have blown over. So I thought. Wednesday, July 19th, 2006, 10:47 p.m. I returned to my apartment and flopped down on my bed. I opened up my laptop and was met with a horrifying sight. My generic desktop background had been replaced with an image of a skull mask, the same type of mask worn by TJ and his cronies in that terrible live stream. A video box appeared and a video message began to play. "Hello there, Jason. It's me, TJ." Shivers went down my spine. How did he learn my name? How the fuck did he hack into my laptop? "I believe we have a hostage here that might be of interest to you." The camera angle changed to reveal. No, it can't be Lacey. She was bound and gagged and sobbing in the corner of the room where TJ was filming. There were cuts and bruises all over her face. "Remember when I told your cousin here that she would be part of our next show? I'm a man of my word, Jason. She had a choice and she refused to answer the call, and now she will pay the ultimate price." He bent down and pet her hair very creepily. "Or will she?" I sat motionless, waiting to hear what he would say next. "I decided to make things interesting for our next show. Your cousin will have a chance to survive if, and only if, you eliminate this man." A photograph of a middle-aged man appeared on my screen. Raymond Marshall, 53 years old, of Los Angeles, California. No particular reason why I chose this random person, except for the fact that he happens to live near you. And now, you have a simple choice. Will you murder one person to potentially save another? To be continued. My Cousin in the Dark Web, Part 2. I stared at my laptop, unable to move or speak. I wanted to save Lacey, but was it worth murdering another innocent person? 20 seconds, Jason. Tick-tock, tick-tock. I heard TJ taunting. Not much time to consider things. A very awful predicament to be in. TJ began to count down out loud. 10, 9, 8, 7. Yes, I will do it. I finally managed to force out. I regretted it almost instantly. So you've agreed to play along? Very well then. You have until the end of our show tonight to carry this out, which will be in a couple of hours. Be warned, one of my henchmen is currently in Los Angeles, and he's watching your every move. You know, in case you try to chicken out. Oh, and we're also monitoring your communications, so don't even think about warning your target or calling the police. I was trapped. There was no way out of this. I would have to become a murderer if Lacey was going to live, and the thought of it sickened me. If you haven't eliminated your target in 2 hours, my henchman will kill you. Shouldn't be a problem. Your cousin tells me you're an excellent shooter. TJ sent me his address. My target is a 15-minute drive away. A part of me wanted to commit suicide right then and there, but I knew that would be viewed as chickening out, and that would surely get Lacey killed. No, I had to do this. I took a quick shower, then went out to my apartment building's parking garage, taking my laptop with me. I opened up the toolbox in the bed of my pickup truck, pulled out my assault rifle. I stared quietly at the weapon. I brought it with me when I drove out to California 2 years ago. I had used it many times for hog hunting, but I hadn't had much time for hunting much of anything since moving here. However, I had it cleaned recently and I had plenty of ammunition. I pulled the rifle out and tossed it into the back seat of the cab. "Put this on," I heard a voice say. Startled, I turned around and saw a tall man in a hooded sweatshirt wearing a skull mask. "Let me guess, you're the psychopath's puppet." I said sarcastically. "Put this on," he repeated in a more aggressive tone. He was holding a headset in his outstretched hand. I took it from him. This headset has a small camera planted inside. It will provide visual confirmation that you have carried out your task. Any attempt to tamper with it and I will kill you. They had all their bases covered. "Such a lovely crowd you hang out with," I said as I climbed into my truck. I saw him turn around and walk away. I couldn't see him or his vehicle anywhere in sight. With that, I started the ignition and began driving to the address TJ had sent me. All the while I saw a dark SUV with tinted windows tailing me the whole way. I tried to make out a license plate, but it was late at night and I couldn't see it. I eventually arrived at the street where my intended target lived. His house was directly across the street from a park. I decided it would be easier to hide from my target if I parked my truck over there. Meanwhile, the SUV that had been tailing me made a sharp U-turn, parked itself on the other side of the street. They weren't kidding that he was watching my every move. I opened up my laptop and waited for a video box to appear on the desktop, which is how TJ said he would contact me when they neared the end, their disgusting little show. At about 1:20 a.m., that's exactly what happened. "Welcome back again, local viewers. We've had quite an entertaining show so far tonight, but we've got quite a finale in store for you." He went off camera and dragged a woman in front, hands tied and mouth covered in duct tape. It was Lacey. "Will a man end one person's life to possibly save another? Let's find out, Los Angeles. Off we go." In the video box, the image of TJ was replaced with the camera feed from the headset his henchman had given to me earlier. I knew this was my cue to look over at my target's house across the street. I rolled my window down long enough for the muzzle to stick out. TJ's henchman got out of the SUV and walked up the driveway. Apparently the man I was assigned to kill was a night owl. All the lights in his house were on, and I swore I could hear his TV blaring. Maybe he lived alone. The masked man rang the doorbell and stepped off to the side of the house to hide. A man arrived at the door. It was him, my target. "Hello? Who's there?" I heard him shout. He took a couple steps outside. This was it, my moment of truth. I gathered every ounce of strength and fortitude I could muster and pulled the trigger. It was a direct hit right between the eyes. Raymond Marshall was dead before he hit the ground. The henchman emerged from the side of the house, walked up to the corpse and examined it. After doing so, he looked in my direction and gave some kind of hand gesture, presumably a signal of verification. "Well, there you have it. Our friend did indeed have it in him to commit this murder. Since I'm in a generous mood, I will not kill his cousin," I heard TJ say on my laptop. The henchman got back into his SUV and drove off into the night. I watched as he drove away. I breathed a sigh of relief, but that relief was short-lived. I saw TJ walk off camera, and another one of his cronies walked into view armed with a shotgun. After a slight hesitation, he shot Lacey dead. I was in utter shock and disbelief. Even though I had done exactly what this monster had ordered me to do, my cousin was still murdered. I had committed an act I found to be reprehensible. It was all for nothing. I spent the next 2 days sobbing in despair in my bedroom. My uncle called and told me that he and my aunt had filed a missing persons report. They had tried to contact Lacey for several days, but couldn't get a hold of her. I feigned ignorance about what happened, because I just couldn't bring myself to tell them. I lay in my bed pondering what to do next. Those bastards had to be punished, but one doesn't simply maintain a murder show on the dark web without being masterful at covering their tracks. but even the most careful criminals slip up eventually. Then I remembered something. The headset I had worn that night, the one with the camera installed. Could it possibly still have footage on it? Maybe not. They probably deleted it by now. But I decided it was worth a shot. It's not like I had any other options. I hadn't taken computer lessons in a while, but I remembered the basic hacking tricks Lacey had taught me. I put the headset next to my laptop and went to work. It was a pain in the ass, but after several hours, I finally figured out how to hack into the camera. I expected to see nothing but a black screen, but to my surprise, I discovered a memory file in the camera. I clicked the file and yes, footage from the murder. They had slipped up and forgotten to delete the memory. That was the only starting point. I needed something else to go on. The henchman had his mask on the whole time, making it damn near impossible to identify him. The video reached the point where the henchman drove off and I noticed something. There was a short moment where the vehicle passed under a bright street lamp before disappearing into darkness. I saw a license plate, but the image quality was too blurry. I hacked in a little more to see if I could clear up the resolution. It worked. The picture was now clear. It was a Nevada state plate. I was one step closer. I typed the plate number into the database. The vehicle was a 2002 Toyota 4Runner, registered to a man named Zachary Parker of Reno, Nevada, about a 7-hour drive north. I was also able to acquire his address, and I was now on the trail of my cousin's killer. You're going down, TJ. I'll make sure of that, even if it kills me. To be continued. Part 3. The end. I packed food, rope, and duct tape, a handgun that I used for home defense, and a hunting knife that I had brought with me when I moved out here. Before departing LA, I stopped at a local store to pick up mace, a taser gun, and a tape recorder. I was loaded and prepared to exact revenge against these psychopaths. Told my roommates that I was taking a short trip, then I'd be back in a few days. But truthfully, I had no idea if I would be coming back at all. These were some bad characters I was dealing with. I departed at noon, but heavy traffic added another hour to my trip. I reached Reno at 10 p.m. Since I lacked familiarity with the area, it took me another hour to find the address of the SUV driver. Eventually, I arrived in a quiet street in a nice-looking neighborhood. It was a single-story, medium-sized house similar in appearance to the one I had grown up in Texas. There it was in the driveway, the black Toyota 4Runner with that same license plate number. I was a nervous wreck, and it took me several deep breaths to calm myself down. Eventually, I worked up enough courage, grabbed my duffel bag, and stepped out of my truck. Slowly and quietly, I snuck up to the house, hoping against hope that nobody would notice me. Suddenly, the garage door began to open up. I ducked to the side of the house to keep myself out of sight. A man stepped out from the garage door and had climbed into the SUV to start it up. But he wasn't going anywhere. He simply moved his vehicle into the garage before shutting it off. I heard the sound of the vehicle door open and shut again. This is where I took my chance. I bolted from my hiding spot and snuck into the garage at the corner, using the SUV as concealment. The man didn't notice me. He reclosed the garage door, shut off the light, and walked back inside. I stayed crouched in the corner for another half hour, believing he might be going to bed soon since it was late at night. Eventually, I made it to the door leading into the garage and opened it as quietly as I could. I had entered the laundry room and there was another door which I also opened. I was now in a dark hallway. At the end of the hall was a bedroom with the door partially open and a light on. I heard the sound of a shower shutting off. A few minutes later, I heard gargling sounds. These were the longest few minutes of my life as I waited for the right moment to strike. I I slowly crept down the dark hallway, careful not to make a sound. I set down the duffel bag and pulled out my taser. I heard a slight creaking noise of the man sitting down on his bed. That's when I made my move. I burst through the bedroom door and shot the man in the chest with my taser. I made sure he was electrocuted for a good long time because I wanted him to suffer. Plus, I wanted to ensure that he wouldn't be able to fight back while I used my rope to bind him to his bedroom chair. Some time passed and he had recovered from his disorientation. It took him a moment to realize he was tied up. He began shaking frantically. Then he looked up at me and let out a gasp. "What? What the hell are you doing? How the fuck did you find me?" "You got sloppy," I said tersely. "But you never thought you'd see me again, did you?" He glared at me contemptuously. "Names and locations, dickface. I'm not telling you shit," he said defiantly. "Fine, I have plenty of time. In the meantime, see how tough you really are." He gulped nervously. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way, Zachary. Names." "Go fuck yourself," he shouted. I pulled out my handgun and shot him in his left kneecap. He screamed like a banshee and I couldn't help but feel satisfaction in watching him suffer. Not so tough when your victims fight back, are you? Start talking, asshole. Go to hell. Maybe I will, but I'm taking you bastards down with me. I then pulled out my pepper spray and blasted him squarely in the face, which led to more screaming. I made sure he got a large dosage. His eyes watered like a faucet and mucus began dripping out of his nose. "Talk! You're getting nothing from me." "All right then. Looks like I need to up the ante." I reached once more into the duffel bag and pulled out the hunting knife. "Let's see, your fingers, your toes, or your family jewels?" He stared at me silently, sweating profusely. "I'll settle with the jewels." I moved in closer and began to press the knife against his crotch. "All right, I'll talk." "That's more like it." He spilled the beans on the names and addresses of every one of his co-workers. He even gave the address of the abandoned warehouse where they hold their live streams. He said they were planning to have another show tomorrow night. As much as I hated this man, I didn't actually want to kill him. I would have preferred Zachary and his buddies to be kept alive to suffer in prison forever. But I also couldn't take the chance that he would warn his friends that I was trailing him. Pressed a gun to his temple and then I heard a whimper. But it wasn't coming from Zachary. It came from his bedroom closet. The hell was that? "It's nothing. There's nothing there." I opened the closet door and was heartbroken at what I saw. In the corner lay two children, a boy and a girl, tied up and gagged, cuts and bruises all over. They couldn't have been any older than 8 or 9. I dialed the police to report a kidnapping, then departed Zachary's house, unnoticed. With an arrest and a detainment, he wasn't going to be able to warn TJ. I spent the better part of the following day staking out the abandoned warehouse Zachary told me about. I couldn't keep my mind focused on anything else except bringing these bastards down. Eventually the sun began to set, and I decided to make the move on the factory, whether TJ's and his cronies had arrived or not. I took the rear entrance, hoping it would draw less attention. I had my sniper's rifle, a flashlight, hunting knife, and a taser with me. If what I had seen from their live stream was any indication, they always came armed. I opened the back door slowly, but it creaked loudly. I chose to press forward despite my fears, my rifle pointed in front of me at all times. The factory was dim and quiet. Every little noise I heard made me shiver, but I wasn't going to turn back now. I had come too far down the tracks to abort at this point. There was a musty smell in the air, but it soon gave way to the smell of death. I recognized it instantly. Spend as much time hunting wild hogs as I have, and you'll become very familiar with the smell of decaying flesh. I traced the stench to the door at the end of the hallway. I opened it up and shined my flashlight into a pitch-black room. Sweeping the beam across, I saw a pile of dead bodies, some of whom were children. I then shone the light to the other side of the room, saw 3 people bound and gagged in a corner, a man and 2 women. Using my hunting knife, I cut the ropes binding them. "Are you a cop?" asked one of the female captives. "No, I'm just here to help," I replied. Then I pointed at the dead bodies. Yes, they hadn't gotten around to burying them yet. They're running some kind of sick internet show here. "And we were next in line," said the male captive. The other female hostage was too traumatized to speak. Can't say that I blame her. "You 3 get on out of here and head for the police station. We're shutting them down," I said. "You sure you'll be okay?" the male hostage asked. "I'll be fine. These guys aren't as tough as they look. Now go." Without missing the beat, the trio bolted out of there and out the rear entrance. I decided to leave the door to this room open, just to give them a shock when they arrived. I reached the main area of the factory. It was largely empty aside from a few desks, a computer with a webcam, and some extension cords. I noticed a step ladder leading up to the catwalk above. I decided this would be a good place to hide while I continued to wait for their arrival. The wait would not be very long. Less than 10 minutes later, 4 men entered the building through the front door. They weren't wearing their masks and they were all armed with shotguns as expected. The leader was tall, lean, and had blonde hair. "Where the hell is Zachary? Have you been able to get a hold of him yet?" the blonde-haired man shouted in frustration. I quickly deduced this was TJ. "I've been trying to get a hold of him all day, but what? I drove by his house earlier. The place was crawling with cops. I think one of the neighbors knew about those kidnapped children." TJ let out an exacerbated sigh. "Fine, we'll just have to do it without him. I should have known bringing him on board was a mistake. He always was a little careless." "Oh, you have no idea, TJ," I quietly muttered to myself from my hiding spot. TJ approached the desk with a computer and turned it on. "Bring out the hostages. We'll begin tonight's show with the next half hour." "You got it, boss," one of the other men said as he disappeared down the hall. I readied my hunting rifle from the perch on the catwalk. The moment of my confrontation was arriving. TJ fiddled around on the computer for a bit when he suddenly heard a loud scream. "The fuck was that?" TJ said. The henchman reappeared looking frantic and sweating. "The hostages, they're gone." "What do you mean they're gone?" TJ asked incredulously. "They're gone. The storage room door was open. I walked in and they were gone. The ropes had been cut." I saw TJ face-palming. "How the fuck did... Never mind. Those people somewhat will escape. They're bringing the cops back here with them. We'd better leave now." I wasn't going to give them that chance. I aimed the rifle at the henchman's kneecap and fired. He yelped in pain and dropped to the floor. TJ and 2 remaining accomplices began frantically looking around, hoping to find the person who shot their friend. One of them walked directly in front of my sight line, and I had a clear shot in his back. I fired and stuck him in his spinal cord. He won't be walking for the rest of his life. Now it was down to 2. The last of TJ's cronies rushed to his friend's side, blasted him right in the knee. But this victory was short-lived. I heard a gunshot behind me. TJ had spotted me. I got up and ran as fast as I could across the catwalk. I heard another gunshot, and then another. He pumped the shotgun once more, but I heard a clicking noise when he pulled the trigger. Using this opportunity, I shot him twice in his left leg. He was down like the rest. I climbed down from the nearest ladder to get back to the floor level. TJ was groaning in pain and holding onto his leg. I decided to have a little more fun as I approached him. I fired another round, this time into his shoulder. Took out the hunting knife and made an underhanded toss. It landed in his right leg. Finally, I tased the bastard and made him squirm and flop around like fish on dry land. "Oh, how the mighty have fallen," I said smugly. Once TJ regained his composure, he looked at me. "You? Surprised to see me, you son of a bitch? But how did... Wait, don't tell me. Zachary? Like you said, he was always a little careless. And this time it came back to bite you in the ass." TJ chuckled. "Okay, so now what? You'll be going to prison with the rest of us. Or have you forgotten the murder you committed on our behalf? I angrily struck TJ in his chest cavity with the butt of my rifle. On your behalf? You blackmailed me, dipshit. You said you would let Lacey free if I killed Raymond Marshall. No, I said I might not kill her if you killed him. In case you've forgotten, it was my henchman who pulled the trigger on your cousin. Close enough. These men follow your orders like blind sheep. Her blood is on your hands as well as the blood of Raymond Marshall. You know damn well I wasn't a willing participant. You're right, you weren't. Marshall's death was my responsibility. But so what? You can't prove it. You're still going down with the rest of us. Actually, I can. With that look, I took out my tape recorder and played back our entire conversation. Face it, even a district attorney pressed charges against me. Do you really think any jury will vote to convict once they hear the whole story? TJ was silent for a while. Eventually he spoke up. Are you going to kill me? As soon as he said those words, we heard sirens off in the distance. They were getting closer. I looked down on TJ. No, I won't kill you. Your cellmates will do that for me. Story number 1. I took a little break for a few days before I decided to go back in the true red rooms. I paid my Bitcoin and got a cent password. It took a few days before they sent it to me along with another username. I guess this is how they managed to keep it so secretive, so that way people couldn't be tracked. I put in my username and password on the first page. The particular red room number 2 brought you to another page that asked for a password. So instead of one page, it went through 2, I guess for extra protection. A bright red screen flashing big, bold black letters read, Live Dissections, Inc. Underneath the black box was a list of IP addresses that were recorded. Beside each one were the words permitted or banned. I assume some people abused their privilege on this site, or possibly tried to hack it. They wanted those people to know they were being watched. As for the rules on the written site, they were simple. Number 1, you can pick and choose from a list of surgical tools. There were cranium drills, bone saws, rib knives, and all types of cutting and dissecting instruments. The list went on and on. Number 2, you must keep paying Bitcoin to keep playing. You communicate what you want to the victim through the chat box. You are not allowed to chat with other users or make comments to them. 5 users popped up in the chat box, including me. Your waiting time is 5 minutes popped up on the black screen. Then the live stream began to start. I took a deep breath. A man who is obviously sedated is lying in what looks like a green dentist chair. He is in a hospital gown. His wrists and ankles are strapped down. 2 people in doctor's scrubs and masks were injecting him in the arm with 2 different needles. Then the messages started popping up on the chat box. One user typed, I want to see an amputation of the arm, please. Another said, drill his head open and pull his skin down over his face, like they do with autopsies. Another user wanted a complete organ dissection. Other users typed in foreign language that I couldn't understand. I think I'm going to throw up. I could clearly see the poor man had labored breathing. They must have had him really sedated. All of these people were sickly bidding on what they wanted to see. The surgery that won was the arm amputation. I was glad I would not have to view the other 2. I don't think I could have stomached it. The user, C Dead Riser 5893, must have paid the most Bitcoin. I saw one of the surgeons grab a scalpel as camera zoomed in. Then he began to cut through the man's hairy arm right above the elbow. Oh my God. The guy was alive and dark red blood started gushing out of his arm onto the floor. You could see the muscle twitching underneath as the camera zoomed in on the pink, fleshy, bloody mass. Now, C Dead Riser 5893 was typing in the chat box. Yes. Oh, yes. This is fucking amazing. I'm getting off right now on this shit. What looked to be a huge towel or gauze pad was placed between the cut, open tissue and stuck in completely through the arm. You could see it hanging out the other side. The hairs on my neck began to stand up. He then began to move it back and forth through the tissue in a sawing motion. He was cutting the remaining attached tendons and ligaments, I guessed. Suddenly the man started to wake up and moan in pain. His eyes looked a bit squinty. He looked down and literally passed out. They injected him again with the needle. I wanted to look away. Another user named Urgent Surge 666, who seemed to know all the steps of the amputation, typed, "Use the bone saw and cut it off." Now what looked to be a bone saw was picked up. It looked very eerie with its sharp little teeth like points. The surgeon gave a thumbs up to the camera and began to saw straight through. The saw hummed as I could see little particles of white bone going up in the air. Scissors were used to finish cutting away the globs of flesh still left in place, and just like that the arm was pulled away. The surgeon tossed it towards the camera. It hit the ground with a loud splat. I wanted to turn the computer off. Our victim was now an amputee. There was a lot of blood coming out. The victim started turning an ashen gray color. This guy was going to die and bleed out. "Do you want the artery to be clamped off or do you want him to bleed out?" popped up on the message in the chat box. One person typed, "No." CDead Riser 5893 said, "Let him bleed out. He's not going to wake up after all of this." I couldn't believe how casual he was about leading this man to his impending death. I found myself yelling at the computer, "Clamp it off, clamp it off." I knew I wanted results I would have to pay more Bitcoin, so I did. I typed in "clamp it, save his life." I was this poor guy's lifeline, while he was at the mercy of a bunch of crazy people who wanted him dead. My heart was beating out of my chest. I was sweating, about to have a panic attack. "Kelly clamps," shouted the surgeon. I felt relief as he clamped the bleeding artery off. Thank God. Then the nub was dressed with gauze to stop any extra bleeding. The worst part was when the guy finally woke up. He was laying there for about 15 minutes and the surgeons were slapping him on the face and laughing. He was coming to and in shock. I could see the surgeons undoing the straps and helping him sit up. How the hell could they laugh at what they had just done to this poor man? They almost killed him and took a part of his body away for no damn good reason. For what? All for the expense of someone else's pleasure. Made me sick. The man looked down and his eyes bulged out of his head. He looked to be in disbelief. "My arm," he shouted, with a hoarse-sounding voice. I could see the nub moving as he was trying to figure out where his arm went. His mouth hung wide open. The surgeons were patting him on the back, and he began to cry. One of the surgeons motioned for the camera to be shut off. Everything went black. The live stream was over. I shuddered. Unfortunately, I still had 3 more rooms to go. Story number 2. Hello, my name is Scott. I was recently diagnosed with depression, so my life has really been bad recently. I still can't explain what happened to me yesterday. I don't think I'm safe right now, so I'm just going to get this out. Hopefully people will learn from this Reddit post to never go on the dark web. It was Sunday, May 12th, 2019, Mother's Day. Sadly, my mother died 7 years ago. Since I have nothing to do, I invite some friends over. Let me tell you that this friend was a ghost hunter. He basically loved all things scary. Fast forward 2 hours and me and my friend are sitting at my computer, contemplating what we should do. My friend, being the bold man he is, gives a genius idea to go on the deep web. Now this is where I should have shut it down, but I was fairly drunk and bored, so fuck it. We go on some chatting deep web video. with a random person with the username Dead and Decay. Stupid, I know. The user seems to be a male aged 20 to 25. He is out of the pitch black walking to what seems to be his home. The odd thing that I noticed was that he was holding something on his shoulder. Hey, can you keep a secret? He says, sure man, what's up? My friend says, I just killed someone. He said some pretty graphic stuff after this. I'll spare you the details of what he said. My friend isn't fazed by this comment. I, however, am pretty spooked by this. Mostly by the bag that he is carrying. He then comes to a sudden stop and drops the bag in what seems to be a backyard. This looks very similar to my backyard. I know this because there is a very big hole with a patch of dirt, which is where I buried my dog last year. Out of curiosity, I got up out of my chair and went downstairs out to the back door. Me, being the drunken idiot that I was, didn't bring a knife or my friend. Just a dusty-ass flashlight. What I saw when I walked outside still haunts me. I was hit with a rotten smell. I saw a skinny man digging out a hole where my dog was and taking his decaying body out of its resting place and putting another body in there in its place. I tried to chase after him, but it was no use. I called the police, but nobody believed me. It was now 9 a.m. and I didn't go to work today. I'm writing this now because I think he's coming back to finish the job. Update. It's now 3:30, and I've seen the same white van pass my house 5 times. It seems as if the driver is scoping out my house. These may be my last minutes. If I don't make it, spread the word. Update number 2. The van is parked outside my door and a man is walking out of it, coming up to my front door. I have my .44 caliber gun at my hip while typing this. The man is fiddling with my front doorknob. I feel as if these are my final breaths. I feel like ending it now and jumping out the window. Story number 3. My name is Melanie, and right now things are not looking good for me. I know this isn't going to end well, but I might as well recount these past events to you while I still have time. Not that it will matter in the grand scheme of things. However, I will at the very least have an opportunity to notify my loved ones of the nature of my imminent disappearance, as well as have some peace of mind that I can prevent the suffering of others who might attempt to follow in my footsteps. Now that you've heard my motivations, now that there is nothing you can do to prevent what is about to occur, let me tell you about my encounter with a classmate who was a deep web killer. It all transpired 3 weeks ago. I was sitting in my bedroom on a Sunday night, eyes glued to my computer monitor, scrolling through useless posts on Instagram and checking the occasional message that popped up, which was about every 5 minutes. Most of the notifications were mundane, such as a girlfriend wanting to know if I would be available next weekend, and a steady stream of likes pouring in for my new post. Like I said, nothing out of the ordinary, and it became pretty mind-numbing quickly. I wanted to find something to engage me, something to give me a sense of danger and help me pass the time. I turned to surfing the deep web. I had heard about it from some of the tech junkies from my classes, and honestly it sounded pretty far-fetched, but I was bored and desperate to find adventures, so I opted to give it a try. It's funny the decisions you make when you feel that there's nothing to do, like there's anything else in the world you'd rather be doing than nothing. In those moments, I believe people make the worst decisions, the ones they end up regretting the most. That certainly is the case for me. Anyhow, as I was delving into the more sinister part of the deep web, I came across a site by the name of Bloodlust. I became curious and thought, why not? So I clicked the space that said enter. A login page was presented, and I had the option of choosing returning member or new member. I selected the one titled new member and entered a fake username and a flimsy password. From there I was taken to a main page which showed a variety of brutal killings ranging from stabbings to decapitations. I was put off at first, but my morbid curiosity usurped my apprehension, and I soldiered on. I went from video to video, disgust slowly growing in the pit of my stomach, and my faith in humanity withering away. But the thing that really pushed me over the edge was when I clicked on one of the current live streams. The picture on the screen was somewhat grainy, but I could still make out the figure of a man bound to a wooden chair. The man was struggling and desperately trying to break free from the rope that bound him to the chair's back. A few minutes later, a person wearing all black and a ski mask came into view, holding a large butcher knife. The person wearing the ski mask gave a nod to the camera and started to flay the man tied to the chair, alive. This sick bastard started with his face. The screams emitted by the man were unlike any human wails I've ever heard. They resonated through the room they were in, and only seemed to amplify once its captor started on his torso. After a grueling 30 minutes, the individual wearing the ski mask pulled the gasping man's head up by his hair and viciously slit his throat. I was stunned, but the worst part was when the murderer took off his ski mask and ended the video. The video was stopped on the face of Jacob, one of my classmates who I never thought capable of anything like this. I sat there in shock. There was no way that one of the people I knew for most of my life could have done this. There was simply no way. I even tried convincing myself that this was some sick joke, or that it must have been a coincidence. But the more I stared at his remorseless face on the screen, the more certain I became that this was certainly no joke. I got up and in a trance-like state, shut off my PC and climbed into bed, thinking of how I was going to face him tomorrow. Story number 1. My name is Kyle. I'm 24 years old, and this story happened to me only recently. One night I spent around 45 minutes to an hour tossing and turning in bed trying to get sleep. I eventually gave up and got up to go to the living room. I laid down on the couch and started flicking through television channels. Eventually I stumbled across a documentary about the dark web. After 10 minutes of watching it, I went from laid down on the couch feeling groggy and tired to sat up and hooked on the documentary. From that point for the next week or so, I spent a lot of time looking up things on the dark web, watching videos on YouTube about it, reading articles online, and if I can watch TV shows about it. Eventually I wanted to visit the dark web myself. I have a friend who is a computer wizard, and I know he has visited the dark web at least a few times. So one night I asked him to come around and help me get it set up. He installed the Tor browser on my computer. and told me how to access the dark web and what sites to avoid. Every day for almost a week I went on the dark web and explored all the dark and gritty parts of the internet. The one thing I never did on the dark web, however, was interact with anything. What I mean by this is, I never bought anything. I never messaged anyone or anything like that. I only observed. One thing my friend told me was, always turn your webcam away or cover it with something, which I always did. I live across the country for my work, so I often use a webcam to Skype with family and friends. One night I finished Skyping with my parents, then went on the dark web. I was visiting a website that sold weapons such as knives, guns, explosives, and other things, along with hard drugs. I was scrolling down the site just seeing what was being sold when I heard something. I couldn't make out what it was at first. It sounded like a voice saying something. I stopped what I was doing to listen more closely, and then I heard in a distorted, deep voice say, "I can see you." I instantly looked at my webcam and realized I forgot to turn it off and turn it away. I turned off my webcam and went to close down the site I was looking at, but my mouse froze. I couldn't move it. I started pressing buttons on my keyboard, but my computer wasn't responding to any of it. The voice then said, "Let's see what you're looking at." Then the site started scrolling down and clicking on items on the site. Whoever this guy was now controlling my computer remotely. I still didn't say anything. I was too afraid, thinking the guy would hear me. The man then said, "You know what? I will buy these items for you, my friend." He then started clicking and purchasing things like guns and drugs of all sorts. At that point I shouted, "Please stop! I don't want anything." The man replied, "Are you sure?" while letting out a sinister laugh. I then replied saying, "No, I want nothing at all. Please leave me alone." My computer then went black. It didn't seem switched off, just the screen went dark. A message popped up saying, "Your items will be delivered soon. Thank you for your purchase." Then my computer turned off. I started to panic. Eventually I calmed myself down, thinking it was probably just someone messing with me. Still, I was worried and was very nervous going back online. After about 2 days, I eventually went on my computer, and everything as far as I knew it was fine. I even got my friend to check it out to make sure it was okay. He said it was probably just a hacker playing a joke of some kind. The next day I get home from work and I found my front door to my apartment was slightly ajar. I nervously opened it thinking I had been broken into. The only thing I noticed, however, was a parcel sitting on my computer desk. I instantly knew what it was. What could have been in that box was racing through my mind. A gun, a bomb, a human head. I sat there for ages thinking about what I should do. I thought about calling the police, but at that same time, I didn't want to. The sites I was accessing weren't exactly legal, and whatever could be in that box certainly wasn't legal either. I eventually took up the courage to look what was in that parcel. Surprisingly, the box was empty, except a note sitting at the bottom. All it read was, "You said you wanted nothing." My heart sank in my stomach, yet somehow I felt relief. This was over a month ago. I haven't been on the dark web since, and I haven't received any new packages. Story number 2. My name is Hamad. I'm 17 years old and I live in a small town in Egypt. Over the past year, I have recently been visiting the dark web. As most people do on the dark web, I went from site to site looking at what humanity has to offer and how sick and twisted we as humans can be. I clicked on a link that led to this website. It was a live stream that would last for hours, and what would happen was someone would get kidnapped and put in a van, then transported to some kind of warehouse where an auction would take place. The victim would get sold and then transported to another sort of warehouse where the victim would then get tortured. This all happened on one long live stream. The thing was, before you joined the live stream, you had to put in a name and pay a fee on a credit card. I then did something very selfish. I used my friend's name and his credit card. My friend had spent the night around my house a few nights prior to me watching the live stream and forgotten his wallet. I only did this once, and I know it was selfish. I was too much of a coward to use my own information. However, I received an email about a week later from an unknown sender saying, I have to return and stay subscribed to the live stream. I ignored it and carried on with my life. I continued looking on the dark web, only avoiding that particular site. I received 3 more emails over the following week. The first 2 said the same thing, that I needed to return to the stream. The third one, however, said, your subscription has expired. At first I didn't know what to make of it, but I eventually thought maybe they had given up harassing me. About 2 days later, I was going to visit my friend, the same one who I used to pay the live stream. I was on my way to his house. We were going to meet there as he would be coming from a part-time job he worked at. I sent him a text saying I'm outside your house. He texted me back saying something unusual. He said just go inside his house and wait for him, as he thinks he's being followed. I was concerned but still did what he said. I went inside his house, sat down and looked outside the window. I anxiously waited and watched, hoping my friend would turn up soon. The only thing I heard was tires screeching on the road, and then a black van sped off past the house. At that point, I felt like my soul sunk through my body, and I felt sick with guilt. I instantly knew what had just happened, and what that van was. My friend had been kidnapped. From the details I used from his credit card, they must have tracked him down and took him. My friend has been missing ever since, and I'm too afraid to tell anyone, and I'm even more afraid to go back on the dark web. If I do, I know I will see my friend being sold and tortured. Story number 3. My name is Nathan. This story happened in January of 2015 when I was 16 years old. I used to live in a flat in a very rough part of London. It was just me, my mom, and my younger brother Henry, who was 11 years old at the time of this story. My mom was a single mom and had to work 2 jobs, so me and my brother never got to see our mom very often. She would work early in the morning and come home very late at night, around 11 p.m., sometimes even later. I had to stay home to look after Henry and cook dinner, whilst Mom was working. I didn't have a phone at the time as we couldn't afford it. I did, however, have my own laptop, which I used to spend a lot of time on. I would watch YouTube, check Facebook, and visit the dark web. I didn't go on the dark web often, but when I did, it was only to look around a little bit, and usually I would come across the same similar sites over and over again. However, one day I came across this site on the dark web. It was like a drug selling site, and there was a little box in the corner of the screen which said, "Enter location." Out of curiosity, I put the area of where we lived, and surprisingly 2 users came up. After that message popped up saying interested in dealing, I didn't reply and was about to close the site down when he posted a picture of what looked to be a brand new PlayStation 4. Also, he said he would throw in £100. At this point, he had my undivided attention. As I said, it was just my mom, brother, and myself. We just had enough to pay rent and eat. We had an old Xbox 360, which barely worked, so we hardly played it. The picture the man sent looked like it was taken in a room and looked legit, not some well-put-together picture grabbed off the internet. I didn't fully agree to deal yet, but I thought I would just message back. I said, "Okay, what do I need to do?" The man quickly replied saying, "Pick up a bag at a certain location at a certain time. Drop it off at another location. After the deal was done, he would give me the PlayStation." I asked why he wouldn't just deliver it himself, and what's in it for him. He replied saying he would get a big payday for this delivery, but he can't go himself because he was wanted by gang members, or something of that nature. Eventually I agreed to do the deal. We set a date to meet at a point where he would hand me the bag of what I assumed to be hard drugs of some kind. I know it sounds really naive to do this, and there was obvious red flags, but I thought to myself, what have I got to lose? Worst thing, the guy shows up with nothing and I waste my time, or I could actually get a new console and some money, which me and my brother would definitely appreciate. I said this to myself, I would only do this once. So 2 days later, around 9 p.m., when it was dark, I met up with a guy from the site who called himself Trip. I left my brother alone in the flat as I didn't think I would be gone for long. I arrived at the meeting point, which was located in a back alley. I stood there anxiously waiting, not knowing what to expect. Finally, after coming 10 minutes late, Tripp arrived. He wasn't what I expected. He was a guy in his early 20s, had long unkempt hair, red baggy eyes, and a dirty old hoodie and dirty jeans. He didn't say anything. He just walked over, scratching his arm. I said, "Are you Tripp?" He nodded his head yes. There was an awkward pause until I said, do you have the bag? He finally spoke and said, "Yeah, the bag and the PlayStation is in the car this way." I walked around the corner towards the car. It was some old banged up car with the trunk open. Said the stuff was in there. I was freezing and just wanted this to be done quickly. I walked over to the trunk and saw it was empty. I said, "There's nothing here." I went to look at Tripp, but he was gone. I looked around and I couldn't see him. I was about to leave when the next thing I knew, 2 hooded men with masks came out from the alley holding knives. I started backing away when the 2 men started charging me. I turned around and ran as fast as I could towards my flat block. I burst into the door on the lower floor, started running upstairs as fast as my legs would carry me. It only occurred to me as I was running that I'm leading the 2 men straight towards where I live. The lifts in the building weren't working, so the only thing I could do was just keep running up to the top. I bursted through the fire escape, and as I was on the roof of my building, I ran towards a second fire escape that was on the other side of the roof, and I hid. I sat there with my heart in my throat. I was trying to hold my breath and not make noise. I was so scared the 2 men were going to find me. The 2 men did not follow me through the fire escape. At this point, I honestly thought I was going to die. By some miracle, I heard one of them saying something along the lines that I wasn't up here and I wouldn't have ran this far. The 2 men turned away and ran back down the stairs. I assumed to keep searching for me. I don't know how long it was until I finally made the move to go back downstairs, but eventually I had no choice. Thought I was going to freeze to death. I slowly made my way downstairs, and eventually to the floor my flat was on, and I headed inside. I needed to be strong and hide the fact I was scared from Harry. I never told anyone this story until now. We moved away 2 years after this story took place, and every day until then I feared those men would find where I lived and harm me and my family. That was the last time I ever went on the dark web. Story number 1. Marco walked into the hotel. It smelled slightly of old wood and moss, but otherwise it was rather cozy. He looked around and saw some broken leathery couches and a coffee table. He sat there waiting for the reception desk. As he was sitting, he looked around. It was something he always did. He always tried to be aware of his surroundings. He saw the normal old wooden desk with pens and papers and an old-fashioned telephone. The floor was carpeted, a red and purple color. There were 2 visible exits, the emergency and the entrance that had a sliding door. There was an elevator directly ahead of the entrance. There was a cleaning closet with the usual sign, "Staff only." Besides the closet, there was only one other room, sit the sign, 313 on. That was rather unusual, as it was the only room on the ground floor. He stood up and stepped towards it, wanting to investigate a bit more, but exactly as he was reaching for the doorknob, a receptionist clacked out from the elevator. After he received the key to his room, the woman smiled at him, then gave him a grave look. "I saw you trying to go into that room over there." She nodded towards room 313. "Yes, that's right. I was just wondering why there was a random room on the ground floor." "Well, actually, you're not supposed to go in there. It's locked, but people still attempt to go in. I suggest you don't try. It's really for your own good." She shook her head with a grin face, indicating the end of the conversation, so he walked up to his room. Marco just assumed it to be another cleaning storage, but on the third day, his curiosity got the better of him. Before he went to work, he decided to peek through the keyhole. It wouldn't hurt to take a small look, right? He lowered himself and looked, but all he saw was a blank white cube room. Nothing. Only white walls and a white floor. It wasn't big or small, but it felt cramped. There was no furniture. The only thing in the room was a woman, who was also wearing a white dress, the same shade as the walls. She had her back turned to the door. Her hair was dirty, seemingly scraggly and knotted. It was quite a strange sight which he didn't think would be easy to forget, but it hadn't been that much of a surprise. He thought of much stranger ideas about the room through the past few days. Thinking as he said, he went to work. That afternoon he returned and saw no one else around. He decided to check up on the woman in her creepy room. When he tried to look through the keyhole, he saw nothing but red. Guessing she had covered the slot with a red cloth, he backed away to bump into the receptionist. She gave him a look of pity. "You looked into the room, didn't you?" He nodded, worried she was going to lose it, but instead she just spoke calmly. "The truth is that woman died a couple of years ago. We learned to live with it. We couldn't get her out. All of the walls are white, because otherwise she would scratch it all up while we weren't watching, often leaving blood stains on the walls. But after we colored the room white, she stopped. Her entire body looks pale white and lifeless too. Maybe you didn't see that. Even her hair is gray, right? Only her eyes aren't white. She has blood red eyes." Story number 2. I'm back on the deep web. I went on the website and I went to the red room. There was a webcam in a dark room, then a light turned on. A middle-aged man chained up with some old bread next to him. There was a chat box. I decided to type hello. Other people responded. One said cut his ear off. Another person said rape him. I read these words in shock. A person in a mask came out with a whip and hit the guy. The guy in the mask came up to the camera and had a card saying my name on it. I was so scared. I typed in the chat, yes. At that time, the host of the Red Room typed, "Do you like the Red Room?" I stopped the show and closed the browser. I heard a bing come from my computer, and it got louder and louder. Then I opened my laptop. It was a video chat. The man in the mask started typing in the chat box. The words said my full name, my birth date, and my address. I hung up the chat and did a factory reset, and then I went to bed. The next day I found a file on my computer. It said chat. I opened it and it said my parents' name, my sister's name, and my IP address. That's when I smashed the computer on the ground, lied to my mom that it fell off of the desk. It's been 2 days since I broke my computer. I told a couple of my friends at school about what happened. They were shocked and they asked why I did it. I told them just for fun, I guess. Now it's 4:30 p.m. My brother told me he was leaving tonight to go home to West Virginia. I was very upset, so I went to my room. I opened the door and a mask was on my window. My mom ran up and she saw the mask and asked, "Why is this mask here?" I told her I didn't know. Of course she didn't believe me. October 23rd, 2013. It's 1 a.m. and I heard loud crashes downstairs. I go downstairs with my baseball bat to investigate. A man downstairs screamed at the top of his lungs and ran outside. I turned on all of the lights, and the lights were red. My parents came down and called the cops as soon as possible. And when they came, people were outside. My friend ran up to me and asked why the house lights were red. I told my friend it was a man from the chat room. The police told us to stay as far away from our home as possible for at least 2 days, while they investigate this strange happening. Story number 3. I took a little break for a few days before I decided to go back into the true red rooms. I paid my Bitcoin and got sent a new password. It took a few days before they sent it to me along with another username. I guess this is how they managed to keep it so secretive, so that way people couldn't be tracked. I put in my username and password on the first page. This particular red room number 2 brought you to another page that asked for my password. So instead of 1 page, it went through 2, I guess for extra protection. A bright red screen flashing big black letters read, Live Dissections Inc. Underneath the black box was a list of IP addresses that were recorded. Besides each one were the words, permitted or banned. I assume some people abused their privilege on this site, or possibly tried to hack it. They wanted those people to know they were being watched. As for the rules written on the site, they were simple. Number 1, you can pick and choose from a list of surgical tools. There were cranium drills, bone saws, rib knives, and all types of cutting and dissecting instruments. The list went on and on. Number 2, you must keep paying Bitcoin to keep playing. You communicate what you want done to the victim through the chat box. You are not allowed to chat with other users or make comments to them. 5 users popped into the chat box, including me. Your waiting time is 5 minutes popped up on the black screen. Then the live stream began to start. I took a deep breath. A man who is obviously sedated is lying in what looks like an old green dentist chair. He is in a blue hospital gown. His wrists and ankles are strapped down. 2 people in doctors' scrubs and masks were injecting him in the arm with 2 different needles. Then the messages started popping up on the chat box. One user typed, "I want to see an amputation of the arm, please." Another said, "Drill his head open and pull his skin down over his face like they do with autopsies." Another user wanted a complete organ dissection. Other users typed in foreign languages that I couldn't understand. I want to puke. I could clearly see the poor man had labored breathing. They must have made him very sedated. All these people were sickly bidding on what they wanted to see. The surgery that won was the arm amputation. I was glad I would not have to view the other 2. I don't think I could have stomached that. The user, CDeadRiser5893, must have paid the most Bitcoin. I saw one of the surgeons grab a scalpel as the camera zoomed in. Then he began to cut through the man's hairy arm right above the elbow. Yuck. The guy was alive and dark red blood started gushing out of his arm onto the floor. You could see the muscle twitching underneath as the camera zoomed in on the pinky, fleshy, bloody mess. Now CDeadRiser5893 was typing in the chat box. Yes. Oh yes, this is fucking amazing. I'm getting off right now on this shit. What looked to be a huge towel or gauze pad was placed between the cut open tissue and stuck completely through the arm. You could see it hanging out the other side. The hairs on my neck began to stand up. He then began to move it back and forth through the tissue in a sawing motion. He was cutting away the remaining attached tendons and ligaments, I guessed. Suddenly the man started to wake up and moan in pain. His eyes looked a bit squinty. He looked down and literally fainted on the spot. They injected him again with a needle. I wanted to look away. Another username, UrgentSurge666, who seemed to know all the steps of an amputation, typed, "Use the bone saw and cut it off." Now what looked to be a bone saw was picked up. It looked very eerie with its sharp little teeth like points. The surgeon gave a thumbs up to the camera and began to saw straight through. The saw hummed as I could see little particles of white bone going up in the air. Scissors were used to finish cutting away the globs of flesh still left in place, and just like that, the arm was pulled away. The surgeon tossed it towards the camera. It hit the ground with a loud splat. I wanted to turn the computer off. Our victim was now an amputee. There was a lot of blood coming out. The victim started turning an ashy gray color. This guy was going to die and bleed out. Do you want the artery to be clamped off, or do you want him to bleed out? Popped up on the message in the chat box. One person typed, no, and CDeadRiser 5893 said, let him bleed out, man. He's not going to want to wake up after all of this. I couldn't believe how casual he was about leading this man to his impending death. I found myself yelling at the computer, clamp it off, clamp it off. I knew if I wanted results I would have to pay more Bitcoin, so I did. I typed in, clamp it, save his life. I was this poor guy's lifeline while he was at the mercy of a bunch of crazy people who wanted him dead. My heart was beating out of my chest. I was sweating and about to have a panic attack. Kelly clamps, shouted the surgeon. I felt relief as he clamped the bleeding artery off. Thank God. Then the nub was dressed with gauze to stop any extra bleeding. Then the worst part was when the guy finally woke up. He was laying there for about 15 minutes and the surgeon were slapping him on the face and laughing. Laughing. He was coming to and in shock. I could see the surgeons undoing the straps and helping him sit up. How the hell could they laugh at what they had just done to this poor man? They almost killed him and took a part of his body away for no good reason. For what? All for the expense of someone else's pleasure? It made me sick. The man looked down and his eyes bulged out. He looked to be in disbelief. My arm, he shouted with a hoarse-sounding voice. I could see the nub moving as if he was trying to figure out where his arm went. His mouth hung wide open. The surgeons were patting him on the back. He began to cry. One of the surgeons motioned for the camera to be shut off. Everything went black. The live stream was over. I shuddered. Unfortunately, I still had 3 more rooms to go. Story number 4. You're on your computer or laptop in your room when a pop-up appears. It's a red flash pop-up that says, "Do you like?" A little girl's mangled voice repeats the question. Do I like? Like what? You think, puzzled by the abrupt end to it. You click the exit button, but the words change. The words read, "Do you like red?" The little girl's voice becomes more mangled as she asks the questions. Do I like red? You think, confused at the question and frustrated that you can't get off the pop-up. You click it a few more times and the sentence is changed to something entirely different than what you first got. The sentence reads, "Do you like the red room?" The little girl's mangled voice asks the question. Do I like the red room? You think in a rage and extremely confused. What is the red room? Then a website pops up. Just a black page with no URL or any buttons to exit out of. There's a list of names and you scan them carefully. You notice that your friends' names are on there, and your name's at the bottom of the list. You feel something behind you. The next day, the police are investigating your grisly suicide. They walk into your room and find you lying on the bed, covered in blood. There's blood on your walls, and it looks like you painted your room red with your own blood, from all of it on your hands. Your laptop still has that list on it with your name at the bottom, and before the police can look through it, and it shuts down with an eerie, echoey voice, never to turn back on. Thank you guys for watching and listening. Please be sure to leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe for future content. Email your true scary stories to thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. The email will be left in the description box below as well. Hope everyone's staying safe and as sane as humanly possible, despite our present situation. Till we meet again, stay sinful.